On paper, it pretty much looked like Zora and Yuri had a home run with this overhead conversion. The flathead Ford V8 was still pretty much the #1 selling engine because it was still the most economical V8 on the market. And regardless of the fact that there were better, more efficient, and stronger V8s out there by the time the Arden was ready, most small businesses and medium businesses didn't have the money to actually purchase any of them. So the idea of using performance parts that were an add-on to make your engine more efficient, approximately 60% more efficient, was a big marketing angle. But unfortunately, just because it looked good on paper did not mean that everything was going to be a-okay once it got put into practical application. The first big problem was the fact that the kit came out more expensive than Zora had anticipated. This was primarily due to the fact that Zora had decided to go with a fairly new technology alloy at the time, Alcoa aluminum, which he could only source from the UK at the time. But don't worry, it didn't just cause an added price to the kit, it also caused a logistical slowdown to getting the kits to market. So even though Zora was getting orders, a lot of customers would actually cancel in the amount of time it would take him to get a new batch of heads from the UK. Kit also wasn't as easy as they expected it to be to mount it onto the flathead. There were actual fabrication changes that needed to be made to the flathead to make it ready for the Arden kit. And although this wasn't beyond the average machine shop to do this, some guy in his driveway probably wouldn't necessarily have all the tools needed to do it, which tended to limit his sales to commercial fleets. If you're the average garage builder, don't worry about ordering an Arden anyway, because it adds about 6 inches to both sides of the engine, making it rather limited in what types of cars that engine will fit back into. Then there was also the fact that the design really hadn't been quality tested. Arden honestly just didn't have the money to do a lot of the testing that they were expecting to do. Ultimately, customers were just generally unhappy with the overall results of the work they had put in to make these engines. Regardless of the fact that Zora went back to the drawing board and actually came out with a V860 model, sales dwindled out and eventually Arden closed its doors, only producing around 200 kits. Zora would eventually close the doors and go work for Allard in the UK, the company that was actually making his heads, and the Arden would continue to be developed under their banner. Before Zora would come back to the US and eventually make history over at GM. If the Arden was such a failure back in the 1940s and 50s, why exactly do we see so many of them now? Well, that's because of two guys in the late 1950s